France has clearly chosen a different course. "39-year-old Emmanuel Macron elected president with 2/3 of ballot cast over the far right's Marine Le Pen. After Brexit, after Donald Trump's election, make way instead for a leader who prefers, well, as the Financial Times put it, globalism to nationalism. In the crowd, there were even cries of Vive l'Europe, long live Europe. Is it a turning point, not just for France? Well, not so fast. Macron doesn't move into the Élysée Palace until next Sunday, but already Paris has witnessed its first demonstration against the president-elect, courtesy of the Communist-aligned CGC trade union and the far-left movement of Jean-Luc Mélenchon. How much change do the French really want? What kind of change? And if his policies fail, could it still be the far-right's turn in 5 years? Big decisions now rest on the shoulders of the youngest president, the youngest head of state in France, in fact, since Napoleon Bonaparte, starting with his choice of prime minister and preparations for next month's legislative election. This president is also the first since General de Gaulle who's never held elected office before becoming president. The trouble will start with the naming of his prime minister and how it weighs on his bid to build a new party from scratch that can win a majority in legislative elections that are just 5 weeks away. Today in the France 24 debate, we're asking if it's change you can believe in this country. With us now, he campaigned for Barack Obama in 2012 and Emmanuel Macron in 2017. Lex Paulsen teaches at the French Political Science Institute, Sciences Po. Thank you for being with us.
Great to be here.
Also with us, Aymeric Choprade, independent member of the European Parliament, formerly with the National Front. Did you vote on Sunday? Who'd you vote for?
No, I voted for Macron.
You voted for Macron?
Yes.
All right. You'll explain that to us in a bit.
Yes, I
okay.
have to.
Also with us, Georgia Kuzmanovic, spokesperson for the far left's Jean-Luc Mélenchon, who's vying to build a a far left bloc.
Good evening. Left is enough.
Left bloc in Parliament, and you yourself running in legislative elections.
Yes.
Next month in the north.
In the north.
In the north. Public relations strategist Olivia Grégoire is with us. So much change. Kind of nice to get an eye on how the French see it and how much change, again, that they want.
I'll try to.
All right, the France 24 debate on Facebook and Twitter, the hashtag F24debate. Now, he told the crowds gathered outside the Louvre that he wanted to bridge the divisions plaguing France. He also reminded them, well, that the whole world was watching.
L'Europe et le monde.
Europe and the world are waiting for us to defend the spirit of the Enlightenment, under threat in so many places. They're waiting for us to defend liberty, to protect the oppressed. They're waiting for us to bring a new hope, a new humanism to a safer world, a world whose liberty is being defended, a world of growth with more justice and environmental sustainability. They're waiting for us to finally be ourselves.
Lex Paulsen, I suppose your American friends seeing this election through the prism of people who've lived through the one in the United States.
Yeah, we've, in the last 8 years, seen two historic elections in my home country in 2008 and 2016. The great difference, of course, is that there's a partisan realignment happening in France that wasn't the case in the U.S. In fact, after Barack Obama's election, the Republicans decided very quickly that whatever the president proposed, they were going to oppose, and it made legislating extremely difficult. Here in France, you have 74% of the French voters who cast a vote for one of the two major parties in 2012. Now it was 24% in the first round, meaning that there's an enormous desire for new answers from the party system in France that Barack Obama did not have the opportunity in his presidency. So I think it's equally historic, maybe even more of an opportunity for Macron.
That means I get to ask you the question I wanted earlier. Why did you vote for Emmanuel Macron, somebody who used to be at the National Front?
Because I experienced
the reality of Front National. So when I was elected, I thought this party could change the situation in France, to reform France, to propose serious reform. It's absolutely not the case. This party and its leader are not able to transform the country. They deny globalization instead of trying to adapt France to globalization. And that's what we have to do. And the good news with Macron, even if I do not support Macron, I mean, I voted for him, there are some good things, in my opinion, but on the other hand, I regret a kind of angelism regarding identity crisis in France. I think he do not understand what's going on really about the problem of Islamization, radical Islam in France. But economically speaking, I support his view because I think he really wants to adapt France to globalization.
How do you feel when you hear people saying "Vive l'Europe" and when you hear the Beethoven's Hymn to Joy, which is the ode of the European Union?
I want reform for Europe. I do not want to destroy Europe as a project. I believe we need a strong Europe in a multipolar world. So that's not my project to destroy Europe, and that was not my project entering in the National Front. And there is, even in that party, you have a debate regarding Europe. Some people criticizing the situation about Euro, about what Le Pen decided to propose to exit from Euro.
All right, so the splintering is taking place not just within the main center-right and center-left blocks that Lex was talking about, and where right now there's a split over how to approach these legislative elections. It could benefit the Jean-Luc Mélenchon's movement. The initial polls, and of course it's early days, suggesting that you could be the opposition on the left soon. Your thoughts about Macron's win? Is it positive for France?
First, what is positive for France is that Madame Le Pen lost the election, because we cannot have a far-right president.
Did you vote for Macron?
No, I abstained.
You abstained?
Yeah, I abstained, because we were sure that he will have the 65%, as was it was sure that he will be elected, and everything is a bit built up. I remind you what happened on the first round of these elections. On the first round of this election, you have four parties that appeared. They are pretty much the same strength. They're all about 20% and 7 million voters. And of course, just now you have 66% of people who voted for Mr. Macron, but you have 26% of people who abstained, 9% of people who voted blank or void, which is a huge record since the 60s. Is the president that's the worst elected in this country.
But when you abstain, that means
the most important thing is that most of the voters do not support his project. So now the real fight will be for the legislative elections, and it is really not sure that this president will have a majority to run, and I hope he will not have it.
Olivier Grégoire?
I'm in part, I do not agree with exactly what you say. You're right on the point that 60% of the French people did not see yesterday the candidate for whom they first vote on the first turn. But if you look at the last election and you look at the voices, Emmanuel Macron is far better elected than Nicolas Sarkozy and François Hollande. So there is kind of paradox over there. Yeah, because if you look at the voices, this is the reality.
And
but what's interesting... What?
It had a far-right candidate, which was not the case of Mr. Sarkozy.
Yeah.
It's completely different.
Should be the answer. But the other part...
I took my responsibility.
The other part of the paradox, sorry,
we are the one
who
fought for National. I'm not coming from National.
Yes, but that's
Olivier.
exactly why.
Yeah.
Sorry, Olivier Grégoire.
Sorry, you're going to fight just after. There's no problem, but I just want to finish. There's something which would be interesting to discuss together, is that he's very well elected. Okay, you get the National Front. Okay, you're right. But what's interesting is that even if he got a lot of voices, you're right, he only gathered 43% of the population of the voting people. That is to say that it's the president who has the less support, because he had 35% of people who didn't vote yesterday. So we had 43 in support and 35 who didn't say nothing. So I think it's far more complicated than the figures appears.
And plus the 43 that supported him are not supporting his project. That's very
different. That's not true. You have 33%. If you look at the last polls coming from the night, because it's sociological polls and you should have written it, you get on the 48% of people voting for Macron decided after the first turn. You're right, so it was a struggle against the National Front. But you get approximately 33%, it's the Opinionway and Harris Interactive polls, 33% were support to the program. So
Olivier, let's look at the numbers. Macron's win a landslide in terms of votes. The man who a year ago didn't even have a party, winning almost every single département in France, even winning Corsica and the Riviera, albeit by a nose. And here's where Marine Le Pen has a problem going forward. She garnered 7.6 million votes in the first round, finishing a close second, and she only won over 3 million more voters in the runoff. Now, those 3 million more voters can seem like too many to some.
It's a revolution.
It's a revolution. Is the glass half full or half empty when you look at that?
We get some good professors, so I will listen to you. But the fact is that we have never seen the National Front gathering new voices between the first turn and the first round and the second round. So this is historical, and we can say we don't see it. This is approximately 4 million voices more.
But we have to explain why. We have to explain the problem of Front National. It's based on the reality. The reality is a double crisis. You have a crisis of identity. People are afraid about radical Islam expanding in the French territory and in Europe. And you have a crisis of disindustrialization. That's the problem. That is the reality. If we do not take it in account, then Front National will expand. But I said I took my responsibility. That's very important. You can imagine I come from Front National and I had to vote for Emmanuel Macron. Why did I do that? Because I know the reality of this party now. The problem of anti-Semitism, the problem of totally inability to govern. They are not able to govern. So I took my responsibility. It was difficult for me. I did not choose to put a blank vote. But I have to say that Emmanuel Macron is really impressing regarding some good news, globalization. He says we have to adapt France to globalization. It's a complete renewal of speech in the political landscape. But at the same time, if we do not take in account the loser, what we can call the loser of globalization in France, and there are numerous people that are suffering from the absence of solution, then Front National will win the next run.
All right, Lex Paulsen, Marine Le Pen underwhelming in terms of what the opinion polls had predicted in the very final days of the campaign, but she did gain more votes. What our reporters also found was that many people who in the past would have voted for Le Pen as a protest vote, they actually wanted to see the National Front as a party of government this time around. Did you get the sense of that when you were out canvassing?
I did. I think that, as my colleague pointed out, I think that there's an enormous frustration about the quote-unquote losers of globalization. There's a sense that globalization is a fact of life, and yet that it's produced whole communities within France that have been left behind. And similarly in America, we saw Donald Trump exploit those fears and uncertainties to enormous electoral impact. But Marine Le Pen had to do more than just speak to the fears and maybe even the prejudices of a part of the French electorate. She had to offer ideas of how she would govern the country. Anyone who watched that debate for 2 hours on Wednesday night saw a prosecutor, but not a president. I mean, she had incredibly sharp lines of attack in linking Emmanuel Macron to Hollande or to Germany or to Islamic terrorism. But number one, her arguments did not bear up under the weight of scrutiny. And number two, she had no positive program. And I think anyone who was making their decision in the last few days, most of them were going to choose someone who could be a president, and that was Macron.
All right, we talked about at the outset about international reactions. Here's an important one that came out this Monday. Well, it was one from Angela Merkel, which sounds a bit like an endorsement. But the other reaction that we need to follow here is the one from Britain. It's sort of an argument for stealing the UK for Brexit negotiations. The Prime Minister, Theresa May, well, she's also on the campaign trail. She's got a June 8th snap general election coming up.
Now, yesterday, a new French president was elected. He was elected with a strong mandate, which he can take as a strong position in the negotiations. The UK, we need to ensure we've got an equally strong mandate and an equally strong negotiating position.
All right. What's your reaction, Olivier Grégoire, when you see Theresa May saying, well, Macron's win's an argument for voting for me?
She's very clever. She has proven this during the election. I think on a communication point of view, what is interesting is the huge difference between the reaction of Angela Merkel and the reaction of Theresa May. And I think that the coming months and weeks, because we know that Emmanuel Macron is going to turn around Europe in the coming weeks, I think it's going to be difficult for him. And I think that even if he's elected now in France, he will have to cope and to face the distrust of Europe. And Theresa May also. Nothing is written about Europe in the coming weeks. It won't be as easy as it looks.
Won't be as easy as it looks, George Kuzmanovic.
For whom?
For Macron when he goes and tours around Europe.
It won't. It won't be easy. I would say something you said, Mr. Choprade. We are, the France Insoumise and Jean-Luc Mélenchon, the one who blocked Marine Le Pen. During 1 year, she was built up like she will be at 30%. And if you look at the election, we blocked her in every popular area of France. We did the work. So we don't have any lesson to receive. We don't want what was built up, which is the second round of this election. Everything was done not to have Jean-Luc Mélenchon against Macron. This would have been a far more different debate and a very difficult election for Mr. Macron, because we are ready, Mr. Mélenchon is ready, and he knows, for example, what means to go out of if necessary, of Europe, euro. But she doesn't know. So it will be difficult once again because it will not have a majority. I mean, there is a class struggle in this country.
Won't have a majority, Lex Paulsen?
I think we're going to have a very, very strong field of candidates. Just this week, you'll be seeing more and more of the candidates chosen from En Marche. We've already announced 14 of them coming from all kinds of backgrounds, all kinds of professions. We had 15,000 people postuler and propose their candidacy.
Who's the most formidable opponent? Will it be the far left? Will it be the socialists? Will it be the conservatives? Will it be the far right?
I mean, this is a predominantly localized election process. So we're going to be fighting these elections district by district, circonscription by circonscription, and we're taking absolutely nothing for granted. I think the Mélenchon campaign proved that they were very strong on the ground. I'll tell you, I went to places like Nancy and Orléans and Chartres, and the only other campaign that I saw on the ground was of the France Insoumise. So I have a lot of respect, and I think that there's going to be points of convergence, of convergence in our ideas, but frankly, I think that our campaign has future-oriented solutions, and at least when it comes to the economy in Europe, we have the more progressive ideas, and I look forward to that debate on the ground, and I expect that there's going to be some very close elections.
All right, we're going to pick up on these points when we come back. We take a quick break. Stay with us. You're watching a special edition of the France 24 debate. Welcome back, or welcome if you're just joining us. It's the France 24 debate. We're digesting the news of Emmanuel Macron's win in the French presidential elections, a new era, a new generation of French politics. Macron, 39 years of age. We're talking about it with Lex Paulsen, who teaches at the prestigious French Political Science Institute, Sciences Po, and who canvassed for Emmanuel Macron after canvassing for Barack Obama. Aymeric Choprade, independent member of the European Parliament, used to be with the National Front, but voted Macron. Explained to us why in part one of our discussion. George Kuzmanovic, who abstained and told us why. He's a spokesperson for the far left's Jean-Luc Mélenchon, and public relations strategist Olivier Grégoire. Lex Paulsen, just tell me, when you go door to door handing out leaflets in France, how is it different from the United States?
I mean, first of all, the door-to-door culture, which is still proven to be by far the most effective way of winning votes and mobilizing voters, and even in the age of Facebook, door-to-door campaigning is still proven its effectiveness. It's still very new in France. The traditional way of doing tractage, of passing out flyers at the metro, our volunteers wanted to do more than that. They wanted to go to actually listen and exchange directly in the homes of people that maybe don't meet in the marketplace. And I'll say, I think these volunteers that I met in En Marche are by far the most motivated, the most intelligent, the most engaged.
Well, you support the cause, but
I do.
But is it the same in America? I mean, politics is politics.
Politics is politics, except that every so often you get an election that brings people into politics who never did it before. Obama brought in thousands of people into his campaign. Macron brought in 270. So did Donald Trump, to our great discredit, unfortunately. But Macron brought 270,000 people in a single year. 3/4 of them had never done politics before.
Let me get your reaction, because we all thought after the campaign that happened in the U.S. that, there's a new way of doing politics. You got to be really active on social media and all of this. And yet the story Lex Paulsen is telling us is that, well, you got to go door to door. You have to have what they call in America the ground game.
Well, I feel like there is no tabula rasa. I think that it's a mix of older communication and classical communication and the new tools that we now have thanks to networks, social networks, and blah, 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 blah. And it's very important. But what's interesting in what you say is that I just want to quote, because I'm not elected and I'm not a politician, so I can say whatever I want, and I'm so happy to do so. One of the experts in politics called Gilles Finkenstein, who drives the Jean Jaurès Foundation, explained that Emmanuel Macron was it was 2 months before, so it was not during this last days. He said Emmanuel Macron is positioning at the right moment, at the right place. I don't want to add anything. That is to say that the French opinion, and it's interesting just to share this thing, is not that focused on the right or that focused on the left, as it appears in the vote with National Front and the party of Mr. Mélenchon.
Hang on, Olivia. I got to interrupt you on this.
Yeah, but have a look at this study, because I think it's the good guy at the good
You're talking about France here, a country where you have a left-wing Parents-Teachers Association and a right-wing Parents-Teachers Association. Are you saying that left versus right doesn't matter anymore?
I think that things are moving, and I don't think that it doesn't mean anything anymore. I think that it means less than it used to mean before.
You're here.
Georgia, you're unconvinced.
Not completely. Of course, you're a bit right. But also you have differences between people that are for the globalization and people that are more for sovereignty. And you have those two people on the left and the right. So these two things are crossing on each other, and it's not always easy to understand who is doing what for whom.
But it's a question of vision, you're right. It's not a question of political positioning. It's a question of what do you want to drive the country? Do you want sovereignty or do you want globalization? It's far more than do you want to more taxes or less taxes? I think it's issues that are bigger than they used to be. It's about the project of society that we're going to share together in the coming years.
And this will be a big problem for Mr. Macron in the next election. Why? Because, okay, I'll consider he's a product and is like fresh, young. Everybody forgot he was a Ministry of Economy of Mr. Hollande, but okay, it looks like new, young. But all these candidates, it won't be understandable for the French citizens, because some of them are from the Républicains, some of them are from the Socialist Party, some of them are from the middle, and they're all dudes. Most of the candidates will make it as a communication thing. A list of people that will run for Macron, and I promise you, they are not new, and nobody will understand that from right, left, what's the program. This is going to be very difficult for Mr. Macron.
I mean, I think that is a drastic oversimplification of our process of choosing candidates. I think that the idea of renouvellement, this is a change year, it's a change election, and we're bringing new people into politics. And in En Marche, 270,000 people, 15,000 potential candidates. I think the old binaries of left and right and trying to tag people by their party affiliation, I think it doesn't hold up. This is a 20th century way of looking at politics. And Emmanuel Macron, like Barack Obama, gets his strength from being able to look past false oppositions, false choices, choices, and the French people, frankly, have had enough of those false choices.
I think one of the reasons of the success of Macron is the fact that he has a positive speech. I mean, more optimistic than the other candidates. We are talking every time about decline in France, and people don't want that anymore. When he speaks about the spirit of conquest, this is something very positive, and maybe that's the first time people are expecting that, something positive, optimism. And maybe the fact that he do not deny the reality of globalization is something also interesting. But the problem is we are at the beginning of the process, and who knows what will happen, because he has to tackle with many problems, especially the existing political system is still there, with many people expecting positions from him. So I think he's just the beginning of his problems.
We are all very young over there, but if we remember in 1981, there was a lot of people from the right wing laughing, explaining that François Mitterrand won't be able to have a majority.
Yeah, it was the first time a socialist had been elected president since before 1958.
And he won quite easily and keep on the power for 14 years. So.
Yeah, but again, you say win quite easily. It was, what, a 52-48 election? You know, that is considered a big win in France.
But 66 is considered as a big win also.
Actually, he can have a majority, a rightist majority. It's possible. That's possible. I think it could be a good thing to balance his power and to make the reforms.
We have to go to the roots of politics, of what's left, what's right. Left is defending the people who are not earning much money. And what he is doing is politics. He was responsible for the Loi Macron. For the Loi El Khomri.
Quite good.
No, it's not good at all. These laws are against social benefits in France, and this will be a class struggle if he can apply his program. And is supported by the MEDEF, which is the businessmen in France. And you have more millionaires.
Your party,
you have more.
National,
no, it's simple. It's
struggle of classes.
You have more millionaires in France and more poor people.
Right.
That's true, and that's what's happening with Sarkozy and Mr. Hollande, and they hold the same economic politics. And he was Ministry of Economics. So. It will be more of the same.
I'm sorry to say, but I think we need to move beyond 19th century terms of political debate. Talking about class struggle in 2017 and the ultimate exchange of weapons between capital and work, I don't think it applies. El Khomri created new opportunities for lifelong learning and training. These are the kind of things that will help average everyday workers. Let's remember.
I agree, but the question of perception is very important. If many people think that struggle of classes exist, that is the problem. So we have to convince them.
But look at what's happened to the party membership, to traditional party membership in Europe over the last generation. It's going down and down because people are getting more educated, actually. And the fact that political parties were created at a certain moment in history to simplify people's choices. This is why we shouldn't overinterpret one election between two different candidates. We should actually talk up to the French electorate and not talk down to them and pretend that we can simplify their choices for them. It's a new age, it's a new alignment of political forces, and we should create new categories that embrace the moment.
But you're teaching at Sciences Po. You know that last years there was millions of people against Macron's law in the streets. And plus, they didn't use the democratic way to impose it. They imposed it without democracy, using 49.
They used a decree. They used an executive decree too.
Sorry, it will be the same.
I didn't see a lot of those people holding up Karl Marx's Communist Manifesto. People are, but issue by issue is where these elections are going to be fought.
And what we've discovered during this campaign, the big difference with the United States, where government is often seen as part of the problem, is that people from most of the candidates see government in this country as part of the solution, as public service as part of the solution, that they want to protect people's social benefits. You're shaking your head.
Well, I might agree with my colleague from France Insoumise to say I think government's a force for good, but the idea in France that this frustration that Le Pen has tapped into is of a growing gap between a perceived elite, which is benefiting from globalization, and a perceived community of people left behind. And I think Macron was speaking very powerfully to the need of empowering the communities that have been left behind by globalization by putting extra investment into education, into job training, into creating incentives for small businesses to be formed. These are the kind of things that will help people, not creating a 19th century class struggle. I'm sorry to say it.
It's not Excuse me, but I love history and I'm historian, so it's not because we're just asking about class voting that we definitely are anti-modern. I think it's interesting also to keep the notion of vote de classe. And just how do you explain that 35% of the young people didn't vote yesterday? How do you explain that 35% of unemployed people didn't vote yesterday? We get parts of the population who decided not to go to play the game. So
yeah, let's just remind people this election saw the smallest turnout since 1969, just under 75%. Which can seem big by U.S. standards, but here it's small. Add those who showed up and picked neither candidate, like Georgia here, and it's a full 1/3 of voters that we're talking about. Another point, which is, again, one election is going to follow another with the legislative elections. 61%, according to a survey by Ipsos, say that they would prefer, as Émeric was just saying, that there be a president who is not from the same party as the legislative majority. Lex Paulsen, explain that to us.
I mean, I think that there's a huge hunger for a new kind of political framework in this country, and the fact that En Marche doesn't fit into these categories of left or right was a major source of criticism against Emmanuel Macron. And we heard it again. You know that these candidates, where do they fit? And the fact is that French people are looking for new faces, not just the same old debates about employers versus employees, but actually new kinds of reforms. And I think that this will play out in a dialogue that will take place. It's not new elections.
New faces are not only with En Marche, also in
other
countries.
Thank goodness.
The party of our friend.
Thank goodness.
The Republicans have new faces.
Thank goodness.
So there is a complete renewal. And the good news and thanks to Emmanuel Macron, there is a renewal of politics in France. And I think that's a good point. But for every party.
Let's hope. Let's hope.
Let's see about programs, if they're new.
But the program is not the issue for legislative. Legislative is territorial election. Legislative is an election on which most of the people vote for people they know in the territory. So they will have it will be difficult. I don't know about the majority, but I think that it will be, if you listen to history, he must have the majority. But I think that this election is far different from all the history. So let's bet and have a look.
All right, and just a reminder, it's only a 5-week campaign. Can Macron win with an untested political machine that's a mix of, well, as we were talking about it, old hands and political novices? Kathy Clifford has more.
The day after his election brings the next big challenge for France's incoming president. Macron launched En Marche, a movement not yet classed as a party just a year ago, and it will now have to deliver 289 MPs in legislative elections next month if he's to hold any real sway over the country.
Our task is huge, and it will require us to build, from tomorrow onwards, a real majority. This majority to carry out change is what I expect from you in 6 weeks' time, because I will need you again and again.
He's set special requirements for his candidates. 50% must be civilians with no political experience. They must come from a variety of ethnic backgrounds. At least half should be women. And those who are seasoned politicians have to drop other allegiances. Macron must now perfect a fine balancing act between the anti-establishment line he built his campaign on and reeling in the support that could be his from experienced mainstream politicians. They could include defectors from both the Conservatives and the Socialists. Another obstacle, because it's the first time En Marche is running, it doesn't have access to public campaign funds. However, though analysts say a majority in Parliament is an unlikely leap, one poll taken before Sunday's result found it could be close. Opinionway estimates the next Parliament would be dominated by En Marche and the Conservative Republican Party.
All right, we're not quite out of time, but Émeric Chauprade has to leave us early, so I want to thank you so much for being with us here on
Thank you very much.
In the France 24 debate. Olivier Grégoire, I wanted to ask you, we saw that in that report. It's still early days. You heard what Lex Paulsen had to say, which is that, hey, yes, people want a political alternative. They want the system changed and all that, but they also want a president to have a mandate, to have momentum, a new president. They say, the French, that they don't want a majority for this new president, but do we know that that's how it's going to play out?
First of all, let's be a little bit accurate. This poll of Ipsos was done before yesterday.
Before the result was announced.
It's important to underline because things should have changed. What I feel very weird, but it's interesting to have your point of view, is that French people went to vote yesterday. Around 57% of them vote against Marine Le Pen. This is Opinion One, Harris Interactive. And 43% of them went to support Emmanuel Macron. What is weird is how can we imagine that French people who have suffered for years now about La Loi El Khomri, about the mobilization in the street, about all the social struggle, how this population who was so aggressive with Manuel Valls because of the Article 49.3, le 49.3.
Using that executive order to pass legislation.
How can the opinion live the end of Emmanuel Macron like this just 5 weeks after having given him a power? Okay, I will understand that there is sometimes a question of balance, perhaps that French people want to have an En Marche president and a left or right-wing majority to balance this, but how can we imagine that people are going to vote for cohabitation, whereas major issues must be solved in the 2 coming years?
There's a bit of schizophrenia, and I heard a lot of people say, no, listen, Georgia, you're shaking your head. We spoke to a lot of voters, and I heard several of them say this. I want reform, just not in my particular sector.
Sure. But there was one thing that's true and is forgotten in most of the debate. We are under Lisbon Treaty. And these last 10 years, 80% of laws from France are just the conversion of European laws. And this president, as all the others that don't want to change this treaty, they are locked down. They can't do much, because they have to obey, they are having to give back their budget to the European Union every year, who says it's okay or it's not okay. And the margin are very small for any of them. So I don't know what we will do.
Go to legislative for les insoumis.
Yes, but why? Because we want to have Mr. Mélenchon as a prime minister, and then if he's
and
prime
how
minister,
the prime minister should move the treaty without the agreement of the president.
The prime minister is running the politics of France completely.
Yeah, but Europe is.
And then we have cohabitation, and the president will stay at the Elysee and look
but
at
Europe
his
is
nice garden.
It's the president issue also.
I think my French friends who points I agree with about the need to reform Europe, but I think maybe we're in danger of underestimating the sophistication of the average French voter. I think that we like to break them down into groups of you're here or you're there, you're voting for, or you're voting against. Frankly, every voter has things they like about one candidate.
Everyone's schizophrenic?
We're all schizophrenic. I teach Aristotle in my rhetoric class. We all vote with logos and pathos. We all and I did this in our training.
And egos.
And ethos and it's part of why we have to smile. But no, but I think this is a serious point that French voters are willing in these legislative elections to vote for a candidate in front of them for their local circonscription, someone with an interesting life story, who has skills, who has capacities, and they're making very sophisticated calculus about, is this the person that I want to represent my area? How do I feel about Macron? How do I feel about Europe? And I think that it's going to be very dangerous to simplify the stakes. I think that these elections are going to require a lot of flexibility and a lot of nuance, which is fortunately something that France excels at.
All right, Lex Paulsen, thank you for being with the TV station that quotes Aristotle. And thanks to you. George Kuzmanovic, I want to thank you as well. Olivier Grégoire, please stay with us, though. Media Watch is next. All right, and we say hello to Emma James.
Hi there.
Emma, the president-elect, he's first one since Charles de Gaulle never to have held an elected office before becoming president. And it's still a bit of a learning curve for the 39-year-old Emmanuel Macron.
Yes, he does seem to be on quite a steep learning curve, I think it's fair to say. He really got the first lesson in broadcasting last night, and that is that if there is a camera or a microphone around you, you have to act as though you are on air. It is the first rule of broadcasting. It's the first thing you're taught when you go to sort of broadcasting college, as it were. However, it could have been much worse. The Guardian has been reporting on this one. They've created a little video of what went out on air on multiple channels around the world, in France, in the United Kingdom, absolutely everywhere.
It's called the Gordon Brown, right?
But here he is preparing, having his makeup done. He has no idea that this is already going out live. He's working out how to use the prompter, he's having a little drink of water, has a little bit of a cough to himself, does a bit of practicing, and all this was going out on air. Now, a lot of the French channels came back because they realised what was happening, but in the United Kingdom, pretty much the whole thing was shown. Now, that video, interestingly, cuts out just at the best bit, and this happens a lot, I think, with English speakers. They haven't realised that the comedy gold was about to come next. Emmanuel Macron said, "If I go on all the channels saying this, I'll look smart," and breaks into a wide grin. And then look at his face when he realises what has gone wrong when somebody breaks the news to him. Now, one helpful Twitter user has compiled this. Take a look.
Là, si je passe en ce moment sur toutes les chaînes en disant ça, j'aurais l'air intelligent. Vous n'avez pas ouvert les canaux.
Nous, on l'a ouvert, M. Macron, président. Hello, darkness, my old friend. I've come to talk with you again.
It is very unfortunate. It could have been so much worse.
I think he was being ironic when I said I'll look smart. I think it was kind of done in an ironic fashion.
Exactly,
yeah.
And he actually came across as really rather sweet and slightly nervous. But as this Twitter user says, he really needs to handle his television appearances a little better in future. Looking elsewhere, some of the... well, Marine Le Pen, she was also caught on camera, although she knew full well exactly what was going on. And this was the Front National Commiseration Party. France 24 was there. It captured some images that we can show you now. And it shows the defeated candidate really not doing her best, basically not to look defeated at all. We should have the images with some sound. There we go, because the sound is all important.
But
because
the sound
she is dancing to YMCA.
Right.
But have you ever seen anybody dance to YMCA without spelling out the letters? She is doing it old rock and roll style. It is slightly embarrassing because there do appear to be very, very few people here. But
there was that conga line after the first one.
Absolutely, yes. It always, all the Front National parties seem to end up looking like really bad weddings right at the tail end of the evening when everyone's feeling the worse for wear. Already there is a Twitter account which has been called @MarineDances2, where they have compiled the best of the videos of her doing odd things. This was her in the debate against Emmanuel Macron when people felt that she was doing some kind of strange dance. And then lots of other videos have appeared online of her at that party doing her best to look very happy with the fact that she had lost. It's very interesting. It's worth taking a look at this Twitter feed. I'm sure it's going to continue to grow as we go on.
All right, Olivia Grégoire would agree with me. You know, when you're making that big speech on stage for the TV audiences, the sort of supporting cast, the people behind you, that matters a lot.
It certainly does. And again, this appears to have been a little bit of an error. This hadn't been thought through. It appeared to be entirely unplanned. And as L'Express is reporting, who is the man in the hat behind Emmanuel Macron? Now, you may have noticed this gentleman yourself when you were watching the ceremony yesterday. This was during the national anthem.
That's a shout out to Williamsburg, Brooklyn. That's
indeed. And during La Marseillaise, moment of great sombre, moment of national unity, and this gentleman in his hat does seem to have rather stolen focus away from the president-elect and, of course, his wife, Brigitte. The fact that he's managed to get right in between the two of them is really quite unfortunate. Lots of people noticed him, this person saying that, who is this distinguished gentleman in the hat behind the Macrons? And this Twitter user says, when you've planned an evening of football and pizza with your mates and suddenly you find yourselves next to the new president. Well, this Twitter user says, the pizza delivery man with his hat has inserted himself into the family photo of the Macrons. And it's funny, all these mentions of pizza, because it turns out he is actually a pizza salesman in his hometown of Nantes when he's not campaigning for Emmanuel Macron. This one has him basically painted into the drawing instead of Emmanuel Macron. Bravo for the well-deserved victory. New star, says this man, with the hashtag bloke in a hat. Morgan Simon, who is the man in question, has tweeted himself with a little nod to the hat, saying Team Casquette or Team Hat, and thanking Emmanuel Macron and all of his friends for that victory.
It's what you call a cult following. Many thanks, Emma James. I want to thank our panel once again. Thank you for joining us here in the France 24 debate.